organizing. Oh, click record as soon as I say Kayla's the organizing mastermind here, who has helped folks put together their demos. She is going to orchestrate playing the demo video. Then we're going to have some judge questions and rinse and repeat. How many we got total today? Five?
We have
Six?
six today.
Six. Okay. So we're gonna do six. We'll try and like keep it moving a little bit because you don't want to do a 2 hour demo con. That's too much. Um, so we'll typically each judge will ask like one question for each group. Groups have the opportunity to respond, and then at the end, judges will gather together. We'll pick a top a runner up and a winning project, and then we'll come back, announce those winners. We'll cheer, and then we'll get out of here. I think I like how you have the reminder to us to record. So we made it. Uh, if you're a student in Turing, then I think the most valuable and important thing today is to look for and like find the inspiration of what you can build, where you can kind of go and I was saying this a little bit earlier today, like I think some of the most interesting things to see are just like how do people talk about the software that they built? The software really doesn't speak for itself. So there's this like engineer's fallacy of like if you build good stuff, then everyone will know about it. That doesn't work. Like whether it's you as a person, as a software developer, you got to learn to talk about yourself, talk about your work, talk about your teams and the conflicts you had and the heroic journey you went through to build this stuff. And that's all going to show up in your interview process, and not even just in the interview, but in the job itself. Like you got to, when you are a junior developer, you got to advocate for your work, for your ideas, for your code and all that stuff. And so those are really the things that we're trying to like practice and put a spotlight on today is how people are able to talk about their work and explain what they've done. So I think, okay, you probably have slides on judges and stuff.
I do.
Well,
Yeah.
boom.
First, also, real quick, some folks are in here that aren't even Turing students yet. So I just want to say
Are they
that's
allowed in here?
they are allowed in here if you're like thinking about coming to Turing or you're currently in mod zero. So you're like right at the starting place. You're in the right spot. Hopefully you can see today like what you'll be capable of doing in just a few months. But yeah, like get excited for a really loud chat as you can already see, and we're glad that you're here. And now, yeah, Jeff, go ahead and talk about our lovely judges.
All right, judges. When I saw the judge panel, I was like, look at all these faves we got in here. We got Alyssa, Jesse, and Katie, who you're going to hear from as they get into asking questions and so forth. So I don't need to say too much. All alums, all experienced in the field. Jesse graduated like approximately 30 years ago, Katie like 20 years ago, and Alyssa like 10 years ago in Turing time, which in standard time is like I don't know. Spivak was probably like 6 years. Good years at Ibotta, now working at Stripe. And Katie was at Google and then now at Turn. And Alyssa, I don't remember, okay, off the top of my head, Alyssa's whole career history, but she can chime in and add that. But folks who have good experience both within Turing and then out there in the field who can kind of, there you go, slalom and how do you say it? Grafana? I'm gonna say Grafana. Um, understand the student experience, understand what it's like to be working in these groups under high pressure, and then also how that gets applied out in the field doing the actual work. So you'll prefer hearing from them. I'll try and shut up as we move through this. What else you got, Kayla?
That's it. I think we're ready.
All right, let's do it. Demo
Okay,
one.
beautiful. So demo one is Board Game Buddy. I will tell you that Zoom's sound, it seems to be a documented problem when I was Googling why it's so quiet. So I'm going to play it as loud as I can on my end. You might have to scooch your volume up, and then you're going to want to scooch it right back down when the video's over, or else Jeff's going to be screaming in your ears. So you're going to want to be quick on the volume,
Um,
but I'm going
okay.
to do my best.
So I was gonna say I could whisper, which then reminded me, have you ever tried, do you have an Alexa, Kayla?
I do not.
Okay. If you do have an Alexa, if you haven't ever tried whispering to it, you should. and then it's like a horror movie when it whispers back to you. So I will not whisper. We'll just hope that this sound level figures this shit out. Let's
Yeah.
see. Give it a
Cool.
try.
All right, here we go. Board game buddy. Whoopsies. I got this.
Sweet
Coming
thing.
at you.
Reed, ready for game night this weekend?
Totally. But what are we going to play?
We should use Board Game Buddy to help us decide.
Board game what?
Board Game Buddy. It's an app that lets you discover new board games and catalog your favorites all in one place.
Far out. Game night's going to be lit.
Board Game Buddy is a service-oriented application built with the board game lover in mind. It was created by a powerhouse team of 2 front-end developers, Priscilla and Patrick, and 4 back-end developers, Lane, Reed, Noel, and Connor. We came together to build this out of a mutual love of board games and a desire to see board games top charts, recommendations, and personal libraries in one application. The front end of our application is built in JavaScript and React to deliver responsive pages to our users. The front end is deployed using the Vercel platform. Our back end is broken down into 2 services, the board game service and the user service. The board game service is built on Ruby on Rails, deployed on Heroku, and its PostgreSQL database is hosted on AWS RDS since the size surpassed the free tier on Heroku, and we wanted to gain exposure with database platforms that can scale. The user service is built on Python and the Django framework, and it, along with its PostgreSQL database, are hosted on Heroku.
Hey guys, this is Patrick. I'm going to play a quick demo of the app while going over the front-end tech stack used. We wanted to go with something familiar to build the backbone of the app off of, so we ended up going with React JavaScript for our framework, just basic CSS for styling, some Redux for global state management. Even though that might be a little overkill for this application, we used the Redux for saving and unsaving games in this case. We deployed the app with Vercel and used Cypress for end-to-end testing. Now you can see in this little run through, I'm kind of checking out the details of a couple games, then routing towards this all games section. You can see there's 7,508 pages, and at 20 games per page, that equates to over 150,000 games. Searching by title, I'm going to look up Warcraft. You have all of these awesome World of Warcraft themed games. Now I'm going to search for the best games ever made of all time, High School Musical, and I have to save those to my saved games section. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and double check that they do indeed save to that section. There they are. Some of the challenges we faced on the front end was working with such a large data set. I think the way we overcame this was just keeping lines of communication open between Priscilla and I, particularly if we had any blockers, we helped each other get unstuck. And not originally having all of the data present, there was a bit of upfront work for the backend to do before we could have that data. We used a JSON contract to overcome this, agreeing upon the shape of the data together. And that led us to this awesome end result.
Board Game Buddy's backend is a system of microservices, each with their own database. For our user service, we use Python and Django so that we could utilize the built-in packages for API consumption and caching, all while getting experience in a new language and framework. Coming from our background in Ruby on Rails, transitioning to Python on the Django framework was an exciting challenge, and we realized that the foundation we built developing CRUD applications in one object-oriented language made the process of learning another object-oriented language and developing an application within a new framework an approachable task. On the other hand, facing the comparatively huge task of cross-referencing more than 150,000 board game records between a publicly accessible CSV file and a single entry API endpoint available to us, we made the decision to build our board game service in Rails because of our familiarity with the rake task automations needed to generate our new database of board games. Because of the large number of entries, we decided to host the database using AWS, EC2, and RDS while keeping the deployment on Heroku.
Process of building this application, we discovered that the third-party API we were using didn't expose all the endpoints we needed for our functionality, and there weren't other APIs that provided the data we were looking for. When we found this out, we had to figure out the best way to get all board game data into a filterable database. Our brainstorming session led us to the decision to build our own database that consumed the CSV of all 150,000 board games and cross-checked each board game in the database from the endpoints that were available to us. To do this, we wrote rake tasks that read the CSV, consumed the API, and cross-checked the data from each. We were able to leave our rake tasks running in the background, and they ended up taking about 12 hours to finish populating our database. In future iterations of this application, we would like to implement AI-generated suggestions based on existing user favorites, image uploading and storing, ratings that'll update the overall rating in the database for that board game, background workers to update our board game database during off hours, and authentication with refined user functionality so that users can make, edit, or delete their profiles.
Thanks, board game nerds. Judges, if you have questions, if you could use the little zoomy raise hand thing, then I'll know that you're ready with your question. I guess one question I had is that given you were working with like external data, how did that affect your software testing story? Like, did you in your tests? Well, I guess one of the benchmarks I'll spoiler for you is like generally your test should pass if you're offline. And so did the tests, were they like accessing external API data on the fly? Did you like mock and stub that out? What did that kind of look like?
Yeah, I can take this one. The first thing we did was dive into that API. It's publicly accessible from Board Game Geek. Turns out it's a pretty bad API for what we really needed. So our first step was actually creating our own database. So we only had to access their API one time. Big limitation that gives us right now is that our database is static. So none of the ratings are changing right now, and we're not updating new board games. Like we said, that's something we want to do in the future, is set up a background worker task that we can update. But that did help us on the testing side. We were in full control of our database, and we were able to have it locally hosted if we need it.
Got it. Cool. Jesse?
Just gonna throw me the mic like that.
You raised your
Heads
hand.
up.
This
But
is your heads up.
You have no idea. There's like 5 screens open. This is very, very overwhelming for me. I guess I don't want to. And Alyssa and Katie and I haven't conferred, so I'm just gonna go with it. What were like the benefits and the drawbacks of the architecture that you all decided on?
Yeah, I'll take this one again. Like I said, one huge benefit was being fully in control of the data. We weren't relying on an external database other than that first 12-hour period where we pulled everything they had. One definite drawback there, since we'd never really worked with a data set that size, we didn't have a good idea of what things we should be looking out for, what pitfalls we might have. I think the biggest architecture thing is how we're storing our categories for that filtering.
Sorry, I meant more the fact that you have a Python microservice, a Ruby microservice, a React front end, kind of at that level. What were the benefits of organizing the work that way, and what were the drawbacks?
I mean, benefits of the microservice was we didn't have to rely on a single monolith to control everything. We really wanted to make sure that our board games and our users were separate. They really don't interact a ton other than favoriting. And at least on our backend side, we really didn't need to have them together. We really wanted to try out a new language, see what it's like building a new framework. So that's why we went with Python and Django. And that's why we used it on the user side, which was definitely a bit of an easier lift for us. It's basic CRUD functionality, so that seemed like the better place to do that. On the other side, building a full 150,000 entry database was something we'd never tackled before, so we kept that in Rails. And then Patrick, if you want us to talk about front-end architecture, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, being able to route between pages with router and the virtual DOM helping with the render speeds is super useful because obviously there's 4 or 5 pages to this app, and with the 7,000 pages, we are kind of re-rendering quite a bit, especially if the user's cycling through the pages. So I think that was a good choice. We also wanted to go with something we were more familiar with, and hooking up the React front end to the back end went pretty smoothly for us. Yeah.
Thanks, team. Katie?
All right, thanks. First of all, love the concept. Saw a lot of familiar games there. It's really fun. You mentioned that you had 2 front-end engineers and 4 back-end engineers, and I'm wondering how you came to that ratio, and if you think that that was a good ratio, or if you would rather have had equal numbers, or how that went.
Patrick, I'll let you speak. I see you're wanting to jump on that. Go for it.
We came to that ratio because that's the ratio that was assigned. I definitely think personally it would have been awesome to have maybe at least a third front-end engineer. It was a little tricky at times to get functionality, get things looking the way we wanted to, and squash out bugs was tricky with just the two. Time was a little tight in that regard. It would have been nice to maybe just have somebody kind of work on backlog things, because there are a handful of things we still haven't gotten to as we implemented new features. A lot of tech debt in that regard. But we made do with what we could on the front end side of things. And yeah, I'll let Lane speak to the back end side.
Yeah, I'll totally second what Patrick was saying. I think Patrick and Priscilla were absolute rock stars and totally crushed the front end. So we're really grateful for all the work they were able to do there. I think on the back end, having 4 of us was really valuable to be able to go into a little bit more stretch, to be able to take the time to create our own database or our own API, that we could kind of control the data a little bit more, and then also go to the stretch of learning Python and Django from scratch and kind of implementing that as well. So we were able to do a little bit more having more backend developers, but it would have definitely been nice to have more front-end developers, take a little bit of pressure off of Patrick and Priscilla so they didn't feel like they were quite as stretched.
Thanks, that makes sense.
Thanks, Katie. And Alyssa?
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing your project. It was really interesting to hear about. My question is kind of like more about how the front end and back end work together. So I'm really curious if you guys can speak about, with such a big app with so much data, how did you kind of plan before and during the process as you were iterating through, and maybe some of the challenges that came up in addition to some that you mentioned?
I can kind of provide a little insight on that one. We had daily stand-ups, so every morning we met for 15 minutes, sometimes significantly longer, just to kind of figure out where we were. And backend kind of wanted to follow front end just to make sure that we were providing what they needed since we outnumbered them. But we kind of went through a couple iterations of a JSON contract so that our front end knew it shaped the data that backend was going to provide for them, so they could sort of kind of mock out things before our huge database was ready. And we really found that communicating via Slack was our best method. We were all kind of working on our own things. Sometimes we were mob programming, sometimes we were doing individual work. So when we hit, different issues that we were seeing or anything, we could post in the Slack channel and we could all hop into a Zoom. We also maintained kind of a source of truth mural board where we kind of mapped out what iterations could look like, what our priorities were going to be. And since Miro was really nice and dynamic, we could move things around as we needed to and kind of communicate and reference that as a group.
I just want to add on really quickly too, like there were definitely some challenges involved in working with the front end and back end team. Like this was the first time that we had done this as a full team going between the two sides. And so in hindsight, like, while of course we were really happy with what we were able to produce in the end, I think we would have done a few things differently earlier on in the process as well. I think we would have asked a few more questions and tried to get to know the other side's goals and needs just a little bit better, because we definitely had to adapt some along the way. So for anybody kind of going to start a new project for the first time with front end and back end students combined, definitely take a lot of time up front to try to get to know what the other side needs a little bit more.
Thanks, judges and board game buddy bunch. Let's go project number 2.
Awesome.
Cane Creek.
Oopsies. I
Nope.
keep clicking the wrong buttons. It's like I've never used a computer
Spoiler.
before. Oh my gosh. What am I doing? What is
The volume
computer-
worked out great, so
Oh, good.
we're getting
Gotta
places.
take the wins. All right, here we go.
Hello, sorry you can't see me. My name's Laura, and I'm here to present the behind the scenes of the Cane Creek development petition. I'm a Mod 2 student, and our original assignment was to build out a static comp to practice HTML and CSS skills. I got permission to go off the rails a little bit to work on this passion project instead. And the idea behind this project was basically to provide the Moab community a platform to express their concerns about a specific development happening in town. I thought it could also be used as a tool to gather contact information for organizing efforts, and then also give evidence of the overwhelming opposition to the development. So here's what I built. You can tell I was having fun with the cursor, and we've got some little highlight features. And this is actually a link to a website with more information. The user is able to select whether or not they're a resident of Grand County, and then it takes them to a form where they can enter in their information and comment. I think I would be biting off a little bit more than I could chew if I tried to make this form fully functional. It would also be a major bummer if it broke, so I decided to use our trusty Google Forms instead and ask various questions, contact information, level of concern, if they're willing to share their responses publicly or anonymously, if they're interested in volunteering, and if they're interested in email updates. So what's nice about Google Forms is that it gives you an Excel file, and with that we can put it into a project and do some really cool things with it. Basically, this code turns the Excel file into a JSON format so we can iterate through everything and then organize different types of signatures and email lists. We were separating locals from visitors so that we could get an understanding of what the specific community concerns were. And we also wanted to hand a physical copy to our locally elected officials here in Grand County. And I keep saying we because I worked with volunteers, but I wrote all this code. Sweet. So yeah, we've got some console logs here to give us some quick numbers in the terminal down here. And then we also have some functions creating text files, which were really helpful. This lengthy function here basically filters resident comments and replaces their name with anonymous if that's what they chose. It also interpolates the data into a string pretty much, and then formats it nicely into a text file, which was awesome just to be able to copy and paste and hand to our elected officials. So if we uncomment these functions, boom, 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 and run it again, you can see those text files pop up right here in our project directory. So if we go to resident comments, you can see all of these comments. It's super easy to copy and paste and throw into a Word document. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'm really thankful my instructors gave me permission to do this, because this was a really important piece of the puzzle in our organizing efforts. There's a handful of volunteers in town here that we've formed an unofficial group called Cane Creek Development Watch. You can find us on Instagram and ways to donate to the cause. More information at savemoab.org. Thank you and have a good day.
All right. Cool. I'm gonna ask a quick question, which is like, it was subtly in the demo, but could you talk a little bit about the user adoption? Like, how many people participated? used the site, filled out the form, visited the website, etc. Does anyone actually
Yeah.
care?
Yes, that's a good question. A lot of people care. And so I also, that link on the thing that I built, the HTML, CSS that I built, is a Notion site that I learned how to use from Turing, that a lot of people were clicking on, and I had some page analytics on that. There was like 3 days in a row, there was like 2,000 people clicked on it every day, like new clicks. And the petition has 16,692 signatures as of like 2 days ago. Um, it's still open, so if you want, I can drop the link in the chat. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of people that care about it, and the proof is right there. Like people's comments, people who know about Moab, people who live in Moab, it's very apparent. So yeah,
Love it. Thanks, Laura.
yeah.
Jesse?
I have so many questions, but I guess
Two.
the first one, I'm gonna hit you up after, but
Okay.
what were the technical pieces that what were like the biggest technical learnings for you doing this project?
Yeah, technical learnings. Definitely, uh, I watched a lot of YouTube videos and read a lot of documentation about how to extract the Excel, like basically turn the Excel file into JSON format. And which is what relevant to what we're learning in Mod 2, and then using the iterators, so applying like exactly what we're learning in Mod 2 into it. And then uh, another hurdle for me was getting the legit website up and running. So like from moving from the Notion site to an actual WordPress site, that was pretty challenging because I'd never done that before. And yeah, I kept banging my head against the wall, but finally there was a volunteer here in town that was like, I know how to use WordPress. And I'm like, here you go. Here's all the login information. But yeah, I think the cool stuff that I learned was all the Excel stuff, turning that into JSON and then iterating through everything was cool. Yeah.
Some say that Excel is the world's most popular programming language. So some valuable knowledge gained there.
Yeah. I keep thinking of the Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility, with the whole Excel thing.
There you
A
go.
lot of data.
I love it. Katie?
Cool. I feel like this is such a good example of like make it work and first, and then you can go back and implement a way. So I'm curious, if you had like unlimited time, unlimited resources, what would be the next steps that you would want to do to improve the project in terms of priority? Would you want to move away from Google Forms? Do you feel like people actually have more familiarity with Google Forms UI? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was thinking about, I had these big ideas of trying to get my little HTML and CSS thing to work. And I was like, well, what would it look like if I like made it like, could I pair with a backend person and make this work? And after thinking about it, I was like, it's just going to take too much time. And then I went to Google Forms. I just had no idea how big this was going to get. And I think because so many people know Google and stuff, it was actually a really good thing to use Google Forms because it's very intuitive. Almost everybody's got a Gmail account. Yeah, I'm happy with the Google Forms. As far as the website goes, the savemoab.org or canecreekwatch.org website goes, I think it needs work. And if I had unlimited time and resources, I would put a lot of work into making the website look better and more resources on there. It needs to be updated. And it's just kind of hard to go in there because there's a bunch of steps with WordPress that I learned about. So yeah, thanks for that question. That's a good one.
Really cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Katie. And Alyssa?
Yeah, I really enjoyed seeing this project. I think it's so cool to see passions turned into code. That's why so many of us are here. So I'm curious about, how like did working on this project basically, did it change the way that, you think about development, programming, what you want to work on in the future? I'm just curious about how this project is going to kind of impact you down the road.
Yeah, I am stoked. I think I came into Turing thinking that like this is going to be a safe job career, and moving away from my previous stuff. I was like questioning things. I was like, is this the right choice? And after this, and also being here at DemoCom and seeing a bunch of people excited and helping my community, I think there's so many doors that you can open with software development. And to be honest, I don't know where I'm going to go, but I think it's really exciting because there are just so many doors that are available to us as programmers.
Thanks, Laura. Nice work.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we
thank you.
will get into Market Next Door. Demo number 3.
Hello and welcome to the Market Next Door presentation. We are a team passionate about creating scalable and efficient technology and creating software that solves real-world problems, and we are excited to take you through our application.
The goal of Market Next Door is to provide a place where local vendors, farmers, and their customers can have a platform that brings the charm of the farmers market to their fingertips. Farmers and vendors would enjoy the luxury of being able to pre-sell their items or to discount items that they have in abundance, reducing seconds and eliminating waste. Customers, on the other hand, would have the advantage of pre-orders as well, in the sense that they would be able to pre-order their prized produce. The vendor can enter their email and password and sign in. They're greeted with the vendor dashboard view with the default view of the products tab. The products view from the vendor dashboard allows the vendor to do any updating to items that they would like. They can change the quantity, the name, and any other details. A vendor may also add an item using the form at the top of the sheet. This will allow them to stay current with their weekly offerings. They can open and add an image and add the item.
Okay, so now that we have some vendors and items set up and we're signed into our app as a customer, we arrive here at the dashboard. Let's go to vendor and let's go to Spud's Potatoes. And let's get a 5 pound of gold potatoes. We'll pre-order that, get an order confirmation with all of the information that we need, including the total, and let's confirm that order. And we get this dialog that says our order was received. And now we can go back to our orders page, and down here we can see our new order. On the front end, the framework that we used was React and TypeScript for its ease of use. Because the components are modular and reusable, which makes it easier to maintain and scale the app. And we also implemented the Leaflet JavaScript library for interactive maps. It's lightweight and easy to use.
We built our backend using Python with the Django framework. Our comprehensive testing suite is powered by PyTest, integrated with SQLite. For production, we rely on PostgreSQL, deploying our application through Heroku, with the added benefit of continuous integration and deployment through CircleCI for seamless workflow. Furthermore, for optimal storage and retrieval of photos linked to vendor items, we've incorporated AWS S3 into our tech stack. Our team fostered a collaborative workflow centered around a shared Notion workspace, facilitating initial project brainstorming, database schema design, and compiling resources and notes from our daily stand-up meetings. To effectively track features and necessary tasks, we use GitHub project boards, ensuring transparent project management.
I was onboarded to the Market Next Door as a part of their backend team after the initial phase of the project. During an onboarding meeting where we ran through the codebase, they provided me with a list of resources they had used to learn Python and Django, as well as cheat sheets in the form of GitHub gists they had made. Once I dove a bit deeper into the codebase, I was able to schedule meetings with specific team members on topics such as testing and API consumption in the Django framework. With all this guidance and clear documentation, I was able to ingest an external API as a brand new team member, which served as data for our mapping component on our front end.
Our next iteration of the project will be to enable users to register for the markets they search for. This will create a more dynamic approach to the application, allowing customers to see only the vendors and items available at the market selected. To achieve this, we're continuously working on active branches which have already versioned the Django API on the backend between version 1 and 2, along with updating the React API calls on the front end. While our application awaits a major lift in version 2, another portion of the team worked on additional features that might improve the quality of life of the application. We introduced the AWS CloudFront CDN to deliver our S3 assets faster and initialize caching. We also consumed a weather API for version 2 to update users on forecast data for the weekend of the market.
On a separate branch, we experimented with Auth0 with our React app and looked at the different ways that we could further secure our login pages.
Thanks, Market Next Door team. Judges, if you got questions, throw those hands up. I'll ask you a quick one is just like overall impressions working in Django and like what you liked, what you didn't like coming from a Ruby Rails background.
I can jump in here. It was definitely a big lift to learn something brand new, but it was really exciting to see how a lot of what we had learned in Rails really transferred over to Python and Django. It's not quite as organized, so the organizational structure was kind of frustrating coming from Rails. And having to import everything you need, while it's nice to see, kind of what's going on behind the scenes, compared to Rails, it kind of has it in magic. It can be frustrating to know like what to import where. So that was kind of an interesting thing to learn as well.
I can kind of tack on to that. It was kind of interesting to experience the different framework through Rails, because Rails is what we were used to. Rails automatically will know to grab things from your models if you're importing it through your views in your controller. In Django, you have to declare all of those connections. You have to declare where you're getting things from, how those connections are set up, which was different. And I personally like it better because it's explicit. You know exactly what you're getting, where you're getting it from.
Thanks. Alyssa?
Yeah, first of all, shout out to that video production. It was really great to see. I'm jealous. I'm not very good at that stuff, so amazing. I have a question for the front end team in regards to utilizing TypeScript. I'm just curious, first time implementing TypeScript, awesome, but curious about the decision to use type definitions versus using interfaces, and kind of if you thought about that, or if it came up, or yeah, what's going on with that?
Yeah, I can jump in on this a little bit. I know there's a little bit of crossover between interface and type. The little research that I did on the difference just kind of led me down the path to type, and also the tutorials that I used and that Anne used type a lot. So we just kind of fell into that. And it didn't seem like we needed to use interface, so we didn't really come up on to a place where we actually had to like really figure out the interface at all.
Thank you.
I'll add on to that a little bit that this being in TypeScript for this lift was something Nicole Rue was really interested in. So that was interesting to go through that a second time, because Adrian and I had done a Mod 3 project in TypeScript. And I will say that if we've talked about this and giggled about if we could do this over again, there was a team ahead of us that had made a entire like file for their types. And I think if we had a chance to do that clean at the start, we would have done that. It got a little bit tougher and tougher to track the bigger the application got in terms of following those types.
Definitely, yeah, it would have made things a little bit easier.
Thanks. Jesse?
Sorry. I'm concerned that there was no Stripe integration in this app. Actually, one thing that I was really impressed by was the workflow screen that you showed with the various project management artifacts. I'm curious what pieces of that went well for you all, and what would you all change if you were going to continue developing this?
I'm happy to start and then somebody can pick up. That the GitHub project board was very valuable to this group, and the daily stand-up meetings. I really felt like the collaboration from front end to back end just flowed beautifully when we had that daily stand-up. It let us put the tasks into the project board. It let us track each other. There were a lot of pieces moving on both sides at the beginning because we were both stretching. So that collaboration piece and the folks that were on this team were just beautiful to work with. So, and I feel like we did have organizers on each side. I feel like Kaylee and EVG and Adrian and I on the other side are sort of built that way to sort of build those organizing steps. I think that helped a lot.
And a quick shout out to Anne. She created our Notion document, and like everything we needed was just in one place. So our stand-ups, our brainstorming, everything was really, really great. So again, shout out to the team and especially Anne for her organization skills.
I was about to add on to that. Yeah, the daily Notion board was critical. Like every day we had during our stand-ups, we talked about what we accomplished yesterday and what we're planning on working on today. And that really framed the expectations for the rest of the team and for our progress.
Katie?
Cool. Yes, I agree with Jesse. I wrote in my notes, beautiful read me, like so organized. My question is around caching and implementing a CDN. How did you know that those kinds of optimizations were needed or worthwhile in the limited time that you had, and how did implementing them go?
I can tackle that one. I worked mostly on the AWS side of our backend application. So in our first sprint, we implemented AWS S3 to store our image assets whenever a vendor wants to create a new object. Initially, it worked perfectly fine. I was a little concerned because the endpoint was exposed. It didn't expose the key information or the secret key, but it did have the ID key, and I didn't really want that exposed. And then in the tutorial that I was watching and learning from, they talked about CloudFront. I didn't want to dive into that during phase one. I figured, well, let's just get it to work first. And then once the S3 bucket was working as intended, and images were being delivered, we started to have bugs sometimes where the images would drop off. So in order to make sure that those were being delivered properly, we were worried that the images were too large and timing out whenever they were being sent back and forth. So we implemented the CDN, which was actually very easy. AWS definitely likes to talk to its own applications. So between S3 and CloudFront, it was just clicking on some permissions, and that was really all that we needed to do there. And then since then, we haven't had any issues with images falling off.
Nice, thanks.
All right. Thanks, team. Next, we are going to get into demo number 4, Skedaddle.
Hey, I'm Eli here to present Skedaddle, a travel application designed to simplify your travel planning process and provide inspiration for your next adventure. By searching a location, you'll get a personalized itinerary featuring parks, tours, restaurants, museums, and more. Whether you're a seasoned traveler or just curious about exploring new places, Skedaddle is your go-to resource for discovering a destination's best offerings. For this demo, let's plan a trip to Barcelona. Enter Barcelona and select our dates. Set a budget. Define a search radius. You can also search by distance, rating, or best match, as well as number of results. Let's say we're interested in beaches and landmarks, and for dining, local cuisine, bakeries, and breweries. Once we search, Skedaddle presents us with the weather, airport and hospital information, and a curated list of activities and restaurants matching our criteria. We can review the suggestions, and if we're happy with the results, decide to save this itinerary. If we change our minds about an activity or restaurant, we can easily remove it. Next, let's navigate to the GPT tab within our itinerary. Here we can generate a comprehensive summary of our trip, incorporating our selected activities and dining options, all beautifully synthesized by ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. The summary is set to the length of our trip and includes recommendations for morning, afternoon, and evening activities and dining. Everything has also been optimized for mobile via Tailwind. Skedaddle is a Ruby on Rails 7 monolith using Postgres for the database, Tailwind CSS for styling, and Hotwire, including Stimulus and Turbo, for dynamic content without page reloads. Devise is used for basic user functionality, and Redis is used in deployment for response caching. Apart from the standard Rails backend gem file, some other integrations included are View Components for dynamic and reusable views, Sentry for error tracking, and Brakeman for app security. The backend architecture follows the MVC model view controller pattern and the service facade Poro pipeline for clean and maintainable code. It heavily relies on View Components and Stimulus.js to build interactive user interface elements like the dashboard, image carousel, search form, and itinerary features. For API integration, we've connected with several services, including a geocoding service, Yelp for businesses, and Google Places for airports, hospitals, and Search Autocomplete, ensuring accurate and relevant recommendations. Our testing suite includes RSpec, FactoryBot, WebMocking, and SimpleCove, ensuring comprehensive unit and feature testing coverage. Thank you for joining me in this overview of Skedaddle. I invite you to visit skedaddle.herokuapp.com to explore the app for yourself. Happy travels.
Thanks, Eli. I see Katie is ready. Go for it, Katie.
Oh no, you didn't get your Jeff question.
No one cares about my questions, okay? I'm like the sideshow here.
All right. Cool. Well, so yeah, since Jesse got to make this Stripe joke last time, it's funny that now it's a travel app, which turned the startup I work for is a travel company, and we use all the same technologies you do. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, I'd love to ask you more about how you learned Hotwire and Turbo and Stimulus, since that's what I use at work as well, and how you are liking it and what things you've learned about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Hi, I'm Eli. I went to Turing and we were still using Rails 5. So Rails 7, Hotwire, Stimulus, Turbo was all brand new to me. And through a contracting opportunity, we've been yanking out a lot of React components and replacing them with Vue components plus Stimulus. So I just wanted an opportunity to practice it better, and that's kind of where I started with it. Everything from the image carousel to
the check boxes. There's a select all checkbox that'll use a bunch of little JavaScript behind the scenes, nothing that Rails had when I learned it with Rails 5. So just wanted to keep exploring it.
Nice. I'll have to check out the repo.
Thanks, Katie. Jesse?
Gotta remember to unmute. Sorry about that. You listed a bunch of APIs that you integrated with to pull data from. I'm curious, were there any that had like a particularly good developer experience or a particularly terrible developer experience? And how did you overcome any challenges that you encountered integrating with so many different APIs?
Yeah, absolutely. When this project first started way back in the day as a mod 3 service-oriented architecture, we were using a trail API service. We were looking all over for places to get access to different parks. I've since kind of yanked some of that out, but it still exists. If you add like an API key, there's kind of a functionality to add your own API keys and it'll give you access to this park. So I didn't really include it in the demo, but that was a messy service. It was all legacy. It wasn't maintained anymore. There would be HTML kind of buried in some of the descriptions. That was a tough one to use. So I would do things like, I'd have to filter strings in order to make them work well. I'd have to do all sorts of nil checks for photos or links that didn't actually exist. On the other hand, Google, everything I touched with Google was fantastic. The hospitals and the airports is all Google. I might just yank out Yelp at some point and replace it all with Google businesses instead. The weather service was super easy. For the most part, things went pretty smoothly once I learned the AND operator to get through a bunch of nils. And as you mentioned, there were a lot of different APIs I hit. So I learned to use caching. Every time, I think most responses are cached for half an hour or an hour or so, just to make sure that the APIs aren't getting hit too often.
And Alyssa?
Yeah. Thanks again for sharing your project. I noticed that this entire app is in one repo, the monolith structure, and I'm curious, what are some of like the benefits and maybe drawbacks you see to having this whole app in one repo?
Yeah, that's a great question. As mentioned, this app started as a mod 3, all backend service oriented. There was a front end and a back end. And returning to it, I just realized it made more sense to mush them all together. Things I've worked on, a project I'm contracting on is just a big Rails monolith. Once we upgraded that project to Rails 7, I just knew that it would make sense to mush this project together as a monolith. Keep things smooth, not have to interact between services. I think there's a time and a place for services. Here, it just made sense for me to keep it all as one thing, to have the services just toss stuff along to the views. And a big part of what I was focusing on was reducing the amount of time it took to do things.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, y'all. And Eli, this is the first time we've invited alums to bring in like a personal project, et cetera. Can you say a little bit about why you wanted to join tonight and like why you've been working on this at all, or kind of like how does it fit into your career journey?
Yeah, that is a great question. Once I saw on Slack that you were accepting alumni participants, all the people I was interning with once upon a time know that I couldn't shut up about Skedaddle. It's kind of the project idea that never died. So I was really excited to share with people. It gave me an incentive to keep working on it. And it's just been really the pet project I keep returning to. Every time an idea pops up on a contract I'm working on, I'll try to toss it in Skedaddle. And just wanted to share it with people and get any feedback I possibly could. And love demo comp, so was excited for the opportunity to be a 2-time demo comp appearance.
Awesome. Well, nice work, and thanks for bringing it back to the demo comp tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
And Kayla, we're ready. Next up on the list, the third space.
As remote work opportunities increase and connectivity becomes instantaneous, people are spending more and more time at home. The traditional notion of a third space bridging the gap between home and work is diminishing, and people face challenges in discovering locations that cater to their unique needs. Relying solely on 1 to 5-star reviews concerning the quality of food, for instance, does not capture the personalized and unique experiences customers might have.
Introducing Third Space, an application designed to assist users in discovering nearby spaces that align with their current mood, while also accommodating a range of accessibility and fostering inclusivity.
Upon creating an account, or if you already have one with Google authorization, you're ready to explore nearby locations that best match your current mood based on user-created third spaces and tags. This is the dashboard. The dashboard serves as a hub for users to discover locations nearby, receive mood-specific recommendations, and view the spaces they've previously saved.
The navigation bar allows users to set their location, choose their current mood, or filter recommendations using our advanced search form. The navigation bar also houses links to the dashboard, privacy and security, creating a third space, logging out, or a form to contact us, as well as a search bar for users to search for spaces by name.
When the user visits the Third Space show page, they're taken to a page with the Yelp-generated data as well as the user input. Tags can be modified as well as added, and the top mood of that location is determined by the number of votes. A user can go over other reviews for extra reassurance that this third space matches the necessary parameters. Been there? Create your own tags and write a review.
The front-end service of our application houses the user interface, presenting information retrieved from the back-end service. With the exception of user login details, current mood, and search locations, all data is stored in the back-end PostgreSQL database. The back-end makes API calls to the Yelp API to receive location data and reviews, and blends it with the data received from users on the mood and accessibility of a space to create a third space. Our services are developed using the Rails framework using Ruby, JavaScript, Bootstrap, CSS, and HTML for logic and styling. Authentication, authorization, and password reset functionalities are integrated with the help of SendGrid and Google OAuth 2. We've chosen DigitalOcean as our hosting provider.
In building our application, we used an agile workflow approach. We started with wireframes for our endpoints, which we continuously refined for better clarity, simplicity, as well as the appeal for the user. This included features like adjusting form inputs when making our app mobile-friendly or limiting search clutter on the dashboard.
Third Space relies heavily on user input. In the future, we would like to make Third Space a more social atmosphere. Ideally, users would be able to see each other's profiles and share spaces that were important to them. In addition, we would like to add the ability to upload a picture when writing a review. We'd also like to incorporate business default images. In the dashboard, we don't currently have pictures of the establishments from the outside. Finally, we want to improve functionality by using a search radius over map coordinates.
Bootstrap has incredible functionality and is very easily implemented. However, it did not always work well with some of the JavaScript implementations. For example, we ran into difficulty rendering dynamic document object models, such as clickable stars, when writing a review. We also preferred business default images from Google Places API, which were a better representation of third space values. Some of those parameters would have required GraphQL, which unfortunately, due to our project timeline, we were restricted from exploring.
Communication is king, queen, and everything in between. During daily stand-ups, we discussed how our project was adhering to our MVP and goals for our sprints. Each developer walked through their most recent accomplishments and goals for the day. That, coupled with our organized use of GitHub projects and Miro board, allowed us to brainstorm and compartmentalize tasks and functions, all while adhering to the defined MVP.
Thank you for watching, and make sure you get up and get out with the help of Third Space.
Thanks, Third Space team. I had a quick question, which just the DigitalOcean caught my eye, and I was curious, like why you used DigitalOcean for deployment and what that experience was like, and kind of would you do it again? Would you recommend it, etc.
Yeah, I can take that since I dealt with most of that. Um, DigitalOcean was partially chosen because on the requirements they gave us in Mod 3, it was one of the two that they suggested using DigitalOcean or AWS as kind of stretch goals. And it looked into AWS and didn't find the docs as friendly as I was hoping and didn't think I would have time. So we switched to DigitalOcean, partially based on just wanting to try it out, and also had heard from a few people that it was a great place to host Rails apps. I don't know if I would use it again. There was definitely a learning curve, but it works. And once I kind of figured out my way around it, yeah, it was pretty good. It just had it felt like a steep learning curve at first.
Thanks. Katie?
Yes, thank you. Super cool idea. And my question is around the wireframe. So you mentioned you created wireframes for the designs, and it looks like you also had it open on mobile, so designed for mobile as well. I'm curious who created those designs for you and what the process was like of implementing them. Do you think it was worthwhile to create like mock-ups before actually diving into the code?
Yeah, so that is actually something that I took care of. So we did that on Figma. We thought it was really important for us to create that deliverable right away. It kind of let us structure what type of information was important, as well as helped us quickly diagnose the fact that our MVP was a little too big. So it's really been beneficial for us to figure out what functionality we needed, what things we had to cut down to, as well as like other features that we wanted to consider, such as like color accessibility for people with color blindness, and just other factors to try and simplify things. A lot of the aesthetics have been based about the third. So for some reason on the day one, we're like third space. Obviously, we're a clam, and so the concept kind of ended up blossoming from there of like, what does it feel like to find a space that is calming for you? So a lot of the aesthetics wanted to kind of bring that, like, again, that stress-free element of trying to find a space that met someone's needs.
Great, thank you.
Jesse?
I'm curious about the data model you all used. What sounded like a good idea at the beginning and then maybe turned into a problem as the app grew?
So we actually went through multiple iterations as to how we were pulling and storing the data. Early on, we had the tags stored as just like a parameter within the third spaces, but we wanted to figure out a way to make it more dynamic. And so that was something that we changed. And yeah, we were storing data from the Yelp API to try to like cut down on some load time and have that readily available for users. But I think does that answer your question? Anyone else want to hop in?
All right. Thanks. And Alyssa?
Yeah, I'm really curious about, I know you used auth and then you said you used, I guess, geocoder integrated in the app. I'm wondering kind of how you chose like OmniAuth over other auth solutions, and how was it working with yeah, like external things and adding them to your app? Any challenges or good things that happened?
Hi. Yeah, so I worked on a lot of the login stuff, and I originally found the devise gem, and if I could change things and had more time, I would use devise. And for all like mod 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 people, if you have an opportunity to use devise, it seems to be the gem. But a lot of the documentation was confusing. So I ended up using another gem, OmniAuth, OAuth 2, which use like CSRF, like token authentication as well. And that was pretty easy to set up. And then the geolocation used some JavaScript from Hotwire and JStimulus, and then I just did a little modification to get that to pass through Rails back end to the front end appropriately. Issue-wise, the main concern with this was the test writing. So a lot of these things went out to a different space, including like mailers that we had too, and authorization. So we just checked that it sent out the request, but we weren't sure how to get the call back. So everything was working fine and tests would pass, but if some things were changed in the front end with the view pages, we could get errors that it wasn't working appropriately. So testing was the main issue with that there.
All right. Thanks, third space team. And demo number 6. The final demo. Weather sweater.
Hi, my name is Davis Weimer. I graduated from the backend program in November 2023. This project is an extension of a Rails API completed during my time at Turing. The primary goal was to learn about aspects of web development and SOA that I didn't have time to approach while at Turing. Weather Sweater embodies many principles of SOA through its modular design, integration of external services, secure management of credentials, and a focus on user-centric features like secure authentication and comprehensive weather forecasting with a road trip creation feature. To accompany the original backend application, I built a React application to consume the original API endpoints. There were 3 web development concepts I wanted to learn more about during this project. Firstly, exploring comprehensive UI/UX design principles. My goal was to not only achieve aesthetic appeal, but to also ensure intuitive navigation and interaction patterns that cater to the end user's needs and preferences while maintaining full mobile responsiveness. This involved crash coursing Figma to understand layouts and utilizing their new dev mode to provide boilerplate Tailwind CSS. Secondly, the integration of JSON web token-based user authentication flow was a key area of focus. I spent a good while refactoring the Rails API to establish a secure and efficient mechanism for user registration, login, and session management through devise JWT. By implementing JWT, I wanted to understand better how to handle tokens, manage session states, protect endpoints, and through sessioning, and implement best security practices to protect against common vulnerabilities. Lastly, the project was an opportunity to gain hands-on experience with CI/CD. By automating the build, test, and deployment processes with Fly.io and GitHub Actions, I learned a lot about accelerating the delivery for the updates and new features without accidentally compromising the production deployment. As a user, I can choose to register or log in. Let's register a new user. As you can see, the registration form is validated through various use effect hooks, testing regex expressions against the inputs until a valid input passes and is set to a valid input state for form submission. The form also provides real-time feedback using icons and tooltips. Upon successful completion and submission of the registration form, the user is prompted to log in. Once a user reaches the dashboard, several use effects fire off fetch requests carrying the user's bearer token persisted by an auth context that then displays the response forecast from the Weather API and a photo from the Unsplash API. For the selected location, you can opt to change your location, which will be stored in local storage and will persist after the browser is closed. After you've selected the location of your preference, you can create a road trip that will display your origin, destination, travel time, and forecast at the destination. Once you've wrapped things up, log out to clear your session and get ready for your road trip. Don't forget to pack a sweater. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the architecture of the actual applications. For user registration, a request with user credentials is sent on form submission to the Rails API. Then devise verifies sent user params and upon success creates the user. Then third, Rails sends a response including information in the body. For user login, a request with user credentials is sent on form submission to the Rails API. verifies sent user params, and upon success, creates a session and updates the user's JSON Web Token. Then Rails sends a response including information in the body and the JSON Web Token in the header. Auth context is then set and an auth object is saved to session storage. Require auth authenticates the auth context through a custom use auth hook and renders the outlet containing dashboard. So for the dashboard architecture, after the JSON Web Token authorization is successful, 2 fetches are sent to the Rails API as spoken about before for weather and photo data. These requests carry the authorized user's JSON Web Token in the header. Rails receives the request and runs a before action to authenticate the user, allowing access to the protected endpoints. Upon authentication, Rails sends a response carrying the requested information in the body. This same process is carried out when a user creates a road trip as well. Now that the foundation for user auth has been established in the app, I'm excited to continue adding and extending some features. The first one I would like to look at is to add Redis as a caching layer to help improve performance and remove repetitive calls like travel time, location, and photo retrieval. Also, adding a table for road trips with a foreign key to users, allowing the ability for users to save, delete, and view previous road trips would be sweet. And for new features, I think travel advice based on forecast, as well as a customizable dashboard would be very awesome to implement. That's all for me. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.
Davis, like a quick logistical question here or is this a project you continued from your time when you were a student, or you started from scratch on your own?
This was a continued one from Mod 3 backend project, and there's a lot of refactoring, but the front end app was from scratch.
Got it. And yeah, in there, returning to code you had written and decisions you had made 10, 12 plus weeks ago or whatever, did it, like, what was that experience? Did it feel like, oh yeah, I remember all this? Or were you in the mindset or the interpretation where you're like, what the hell was I thinking back when I did these things?
There was there was an even amount. This was actually a project that I spent time documenting, so I had some fallback. And I think the big thing was realizing that implementing the has token function in Rails is like not enough in terms of delivering like a fully secure application. So that was where I started, and then it went from 2 weeks to 2 months as things just unraveled. All the adequate code from Mod 3 needed to get refactored.
Yeah, appreciate that. Awesome. Katie?
Cool. Yes, thanks for showing us your app. Sorry, I had a question and I'm like debating between 2 questions. Okay, I'm gonna go with this one. It seems like you had a security-minded approach to these improvements to the app. Like, what made you realize that that was needed, and what specifically did you look into to make sure that you were keeping those things in mind?
It's actually an interesting thing that it's not really protecting anything at the moment, especially because the road trip isn't persisted in the database. But what it was more about, I think, was trying to do some sort of authorization cycle without utilizing like OmniAuth or anything like that. Because I struggled a lot with that in some projects at Turing. So I wanted to see if I could push through actually building it from scratch with JWTs. And honestly, like I mentioned before, it was supposed to be like a 2-week project, and it was very difficult because you have to kind of approach it from all these other angles of, yes, like you can log in, but what about if somebody changes the URI after they've logged in to the sign up, and just like kind of handling, every edge case possible. How do you persist the authentication if you're a backend student and you are just learning about state and you didn't realize that it doesn't persist when you reload the page? So there was a lot of stuff that I think mostly became the focus in the app was just authorization in general. And now that it's set up. Maybe I should put some stuff in there that actually will be protected in terms of user accounts.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah.
Jesse?
Jesse?
Yeah, so can you tell us about learning Figma and what that process was like for you?
It was definitely a lot of YouTube tutorials at first and getting familiar with the auto layout function. And I have a little bit of a background in graphic design, so that it kind of scratched that itch. And then it kind of became this actually the wireframe I think took probably a week because I didn't really understand pixel dimensions or CSS or any of that stuff until, I'd finished building this thing and I thought I'd auto layout. I had everything lined up so I could see the flex and the CSS. And then I get to the app and it's like huge. I'm like, oh my God, this needs to be half the size. So there was a lot of reiteration going back to Figma, but I think it was a really cool tool to kind of understand page layout ultimately, like being able to revisit the design and then see like, oh yeah, that's not how that works. That is not how Flexbox works.
Thanks. And Alyssa?
Yeah, I'm actually going to be stealing one of Katie's amazing questions that she was going between because I think it's great, which is what made you interested in service-oriented architecture and kind of how did it impact your application?
I guess maybe the idea of like being able to expand, because it was already consuming a lot of outside endpoints. I wanted to maybe find a way to move away from the Rails sort of monolith and create something that was scalable with future features and whatnot.
Yeah, and the debate that never ends, right? Monoliths versus service architecture. So great.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. It depends. Blake's right.
Yeah, I think, when we're new to programming, we always look for like right answers. And the more experience you get, you tend to see like it's all just different collections of trade-offs based on the stack, the hardware, the software, the team, the market, all those different things. Like, yeah, it's rare. It's rare that some things are right and some things are wrong. So yeah, it depends. Thanks, Davis, and thanks all our demoing individuals and teams. We are done with demos, and now the judges and I are going to step aside a little bit to figure out our voting. Kayla, you want to explain this breakout room sitch?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, the judges need 15 minutes to just like talk and confer and figure out the winners. And so y'all have options for what you want to do. So option one is take a palm because we haven't done one yet, which is out of character for us. Option two is that I'm going to open up a bunch of breakout rooms, and the breakout rooms are going to be named based off of the projects. And so, folks who built these projects, you should go to your own room. And like folks who are just here to watch, if you want to join those rooms, you can ask questions about the projects. You can give kudos and shout outs and just tell them that they did a great job. It's kind of like imagine that you're at like a science fair and you're just like hopping around the booths. It's kind of what's happening. So I'll open up the rooms. I'm going to set a timer for 15 minutes. If you're going to take a palm, yeah, I would be back around like 12-ish minutes from now because sometimes debates go fast, sometimes they don't, but I'm going to give us that 15-minute buffer just in case. But yeah, I'll open up the rooms now. The only rule is that you cannot go to the judges room. It's very clearly marked because I used all caps and said judges only. So anything else goes. Go take a palm, go give kudos to groups, and we'll see you back here in about 12 to 15-ish minutes. Rooms are open.
10 more seconds for folks to filter in. All right. I think we're good to go. First up, thanks to all 6 of our presentations, both from groups and individuals tonight. It was cool bringing in some alums, showing off some of their work, along with big groups and medium-sized groups. We're kind of all over the map there. Thanks to Kayla for organizing and driving slides and demo videos and all those pieces. And to our judges, Jesse, Katie, and Alyssa for their questions and coming back and bringing your perspective and expertise. So the judges and I and Kayla reviewed the 6 projects, tried to set a ranking, and we came up with a top 2. So it doesn't. Okay, my video is not really cooperating. We'll see if it will go. This is how we demo comp drum roll goes. In second place. Thank you, Blaine. Skedaddle. And Jesse's gonna share a couple notes, highlights on Skedaddle from the judges.
Yeah, great job. What we loved about it, we felt like the user interface was really strong. We especially loved that you really made the most out of Rails and you moved from Rails 5 to Rails 7 and you figured out all the new stuff in Rails 7 and just made all that work. So we love that. Also, of course, there were just so many API integrations that were really impressive, including ChatGPT, which we all felt was like very of the time, very on point. So great job.
All right. And in first place, if you can imagine me air drumming, I'm doing it right now, even though my video is not cooperating. In first place, Market Next Door. And Katie is going to give us a little bit of a judge recap insight on Market Next Door.
Yes, congrats, Market Next Door. What really impressed the judges with this project was the strong organization of the project and how you had a large team all swimming in the same direction. Because I feel like although having extra team members might seem like it's always a benefit, it can often be harder, I think, to work with more people and still be productive. You also had really sensible tech choices that were clearly communicated and did some great experimentation with OAuth and TypeScript, adding things that you didn't learn at Turing. So congrats.
All right. Congrats to both our top 2 projects and everybody. Thanks to y'all for being a great audience and participating in the chat and celebrating the work that these folks have put in to building these great projects. And that's it for Demo Comp today. We will do it again in 7 weeks. Hope you can come back soon. And thanks for spending your time with us. And that's it. Have a good night, everybody.